What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another Fall Obsession podcast episode. My name is Sam Thrash. I'm your show host over here at Fall Obsession. Thank you for tuning in. Our guest this week, I can't believe we had the opportunity to record with her. Big name in the hunting and outdoor industry, very inspirational person for a very long time in the hunting and outdoor world, and one of the most authentic and genuine people I believe that you're going to meet in this industry, and that is Melissa Bachman. She is our guest this week on Fall Obsession Podcast. Super, super excited for you guys to get to hear this conversation, to get to hear about her journey and the grit and determination that went into her building a name for herself and doing what she loves ultimately, and producing her own show on Sportsman's Channel, all that good stuff. Just an outstanding conversation. I truly enjoyed it with her, and I hope you guys do too. Before we get to the episode, you guys know the drill. Hoot Camo is a podcast partner. I've been rocking Hoot gear starting last year, actually, pretty recent, but I am in love with it. It is amazing, amazing stuff. I've worn it in Colorado and Texas, multiple different hunts, multiple different environments, different weather conditions, worn it in the snow even. And the versatility of the pattern and the way it adapts to different environments is just unbelievable. And the gear itself held up phenomenally against the elements, against the temperatures, and against the brush and anything that would want to poke, cut, or stab you. So, can't say enough about my Hoot gear. If you guys are looking to get into a new set of high quality camouflage, Hoot makes it affordable, and I recommend you guys go check them out. They also have some everyday casual wear, some fishing gear, some golf gear, stuff like that. So, head on over to hootcamo.com, see what they got going on over there. And if you want to place an order, no matter how big or small, use the code FallObsession15, and that will save you guys some money at checkout. Hootcamo.com. The Outdoor Call Radio app is a podcast partner. Outdoors Dan from Respect the Game TV, he has created an app that you can download on any device where you can stream hunting shows and podcasts on a loop every single day. It's like radio on your phone, basically, and you will catch Fall Obsession podcast playing on that loop on Mondays. That's the same day as our new publication, as well as tons of other hunting shows and podcasts that we all know and love. So go download the Outdoor Call Radio app today. It is free. You can start streaming immediately, and be sure that you follow their Facebook page and follow Outdoors Dan on social media. Outdoors Dan does a couple of different live radio shows throughout the week at local Midwestern radio stations, and even if you are not local to those radio stations, you can still catch those live broadcasts on his Facebook page. So go download the Outdoor Call Radio app today. Ridge Rock Hunt Company is a podcast partner. If you are looking to book a hunt with a vetted and trusted outfitter, then you need to call Derek Eves over at Ridge Rock. He's the man. He's going to set you up with something that is right for you and that fits all your needs. So if you want to book that next adventure, perhaps that once-in-a-lifetime hunt with a trusted source, you got to check out Ridge Rock Hunt Company. Elite Archery is also a Fall Obsession partner. I love my Elite bow. Been rocking an Elite bow for several seasons now, and no intentions of stopping that. Got an Ethos on the way and can't wait to have that in my hand for this upcoming fall. But the ultimate test is going to be for you guys to see for yourself, because I can sit here and talk about how great Elite is, but until you have one in your hand, you're not truly going to know or really believe me. So head on over to your local dealer and take the Elite Archery Shootability Challenge and see what you think. You won't be disappointed. As always, I appreciate you guys tuning in to another podcast episode. If you haven't already, whatever podcast platform you're streaming this episode on, hit that follow or subscribe button, whatever they have up there for you, and make sure your notifications are turned on if that's an option. That way you get notified every week when we drop a new podcast. You can also head over to fallobsession.com. That's our website where all of our content streams through. We not only have this podcast, but we have various different hunting shows. We produce hunting and outdoor films. You can see my flatland mule deer hunt from last year. We put together a film over that trip and that production and everything, and just a phenomenal experience. So that's just one example of the many things that we produce over here at Fall Obsession. You can also stream our shows on Carbon TV. Texas Dirt is our whitetail management series down here in Texas. We also have a habitat management series that we produce up in Michigan called Midwest Mindset. Show producer Mike TP puts that together up there. And then we have this show and our staff-inspired video podcast series, Couch Chats, also streaming on Carbon TV. So go over there and check out everything they got going on. If you're not familiar with the Carbon TV platform, then I recommend that you guys Download the app, pull it up on your computer, whatever it might be. It is free outdoor television, and you'll find Fall Obsession on there in various places. Well, that's all I have for that segment. We are now heading over to our episode with Melissa Bachman. You are listening to another Fall Obsession podcast.
Oh, you got her, dude. She's down. Let's go.
Dude, I just shot a deer of a lifetime.
Freaking smoked him.
One with nature, and if you're a believer, one with God.
Definitely gets your heart pumping. Boy, you are in trouble.
Fall Obsession Podcast.
Welcome back, everybody, to another Fall Obsession Podcast episode. My name is Sam, hosting you guys again. And this week, I am on here with Melissa Bachman. Welcome to Fall Obsession Podcast, Melissa.
Well, thank you for having me. I sure appreciate it.
Well, the pleasure is all ours. As I mentioned a little while ago, I really appreciate you accepting our invite to come on the show, and it's an honor to have you.
Well, I appreciate it very much and excited to chat.
Absolutely. So you're no stranger to the outdoor industry, to outdoor media. You are, in my opinion, probably one of the more influential people in that space over the years and everything. But I want to dive in and just to break the ice and start things off, I want to talk a little bit about your background, because it's quite a journey that you've had. And where did it all start for you? How did you get into hunting in the outdoors?
Well, I think, my story is very similar to what a lot of people do. They just love hunting, right? I grew up in a hunting family. I grew up in West Central Minnesota, tiny little town, under 2,000 people, and my mom and dad hunted, and they brought us along. My brother and I, we always went along. And to this day, they joke that the only reason they actually brought us along is because they didn't want to pay for a babysitter. And, whether or not that's true, it doesn't really matter. The point is, we did things together as a family. And, we never were forced to go, but we always wanted to be there. And I think that's something that's so important. And that instilled this passion in me very early. Now, growing up in Minnesota, you had to be 12 years old before you could hunt. I have my own thoughts on that. I think it's too old. And a lot of states have changed since then. But when I was growing up, it was 12 years old. So I had to wait. And I was so excited about hunting that literally the night before, I couldn't even sleep. I was up drawing maps of where we should go first. And I'm sure my dad's thinking, oh my goodness, what have I done here? But it just kind of shows you how excited I was. So at 12, I was able to harvest 2 small does. I shot 2 fawns, right? We're able to party hunt in Minnesota. My dad let me shoot his tag, and he probably could have carried both of them out, but he never, made any comment that they were young, that they were small. I was so proud of them. And I didn't even know for a couple of years that I had shot anything different than, anything else. And I think that's really important, because when you get started hunting, I think it's so important because you want to make your parents proud, right? You want to do well. You want to make good shots. And I did all that, but that's what really kind of got me hooked on hunting. And as I got older, my senior year, my parents actually let me have a work permit. And I didn't have to go to school till I think it was 10 o'clock each morning.
Oh, nice.
And I got to bow hunt every morning before school. So it just kind of shows you how much I loved it. And then I went to college. I got a double major in television production and in Spanish. And originally, I either was going to go to school and be an anesthesiologist, or when I kind of went the route of TV, I wanted to maybe do the NFL sidelines, do, some sports related stuff. And it wasn't until a little later I realized, I love to hunt. I might be able to make a career out of it. So I sent out right around 74 resume reels, and I got all 74 no's. Now, this is after graduating college. I had double major, coming out with honors, top of my class, and I'm thinking, how is that possible? And every person just basically said the same thing. You have no experience. So I thought, well, that is terrible. So I actually went to the number one place I wanted to work, and I called them up and I said, I know you didn't hire me, but I'm willing to come and work for free if you'll just give me a chance. And they're like, oh, yeah? Well, what can you do? And I said, well, I could sweep the floors. I can edit. I can shoot. I have a background in all of this. And they said, well, when can you start? And I said, tomorrow. And I started working at the North American Hunting Club, and I drove 150 miles every single day to go work for free.
Oh, wow.
And then I had a waitress at night to pay the money to get gas to go back and forth. And it was pretty brutal. I did it for 4 months. And I believe I probably guilted them into it. But after 4 months, they saw the dedication, the hard work I put in, the willingness to do literally whatever it took to get a chance at having this position. And I wasn't trying to be like an on-camera person. I was just trying to be a producer, a cameraman, an editor. So I think people need to understand that I knew better. You couldn't just walk in and say, hey, I'm a girl, I want to be your on-camera person. I did not go about it that way. I wanted to get my foot in the door as a cameraman first. So after doing that for free, they hired me as a full-time cameraman. I actually got the original position I applied for. And then after 4 years, I kind of worked my way in front of the camera. All I would do is I would take on so many trips that if I worked like 30 days straight, I think they gave me like 5 days comp time or something. So I'd go out, film my own hunts, edit them, and then wait till someone didn't get their stuff together, and then they'd run my show because I'd give it to them for free. And that's really how I got my start. So I wouldn't say it's for the weak-minded because it was pretty rough. But the thing is you don't owe anyone anything, right? You did it your way all the way through. You've proven yourself. And my goal was always never to go on the fact that I'm a woman, on anything other than my hunting skills and my kindness, really. Like I enjoy people. I like being around people. And I always felt that, you know, part of your job is hunting, but a big part of it's being a people person, not only with people you hunt with, but with guides, outfitters, getting your sponsors. All of that is such a people-driven occupation that people don't always think of that. And I think that's a huge part of it as well.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more with that. So I want to back up a little bit into your story because you talked about, you know, going to college and the different routes that you were initially looking at and everything, yet still being a passionate hunter behind all of it. What were your influences at the time in the hunting industry that made your direction shift into I want to do this in this particular space?
I'll be honest, growing up, we didn't watch a lot of television, and I am not sure I even knew there was outdoor hunting TV shows. I mean, that may sound crazy, but I really didn't know that until I was really getting done with college and started realizing that there's people who made DVDs, who had television shows, and I thought, well, that's combining all the things I love. Yeah. And that's kind of when I started shifting that route, but I really didn't know anything about it. I didn't have any mentors. I didn't have anyone that I had watched. I just started looking for places that I could work and applying. And, you know, I thought that it would be helpful that I had the background in television and that I'm a hunter. But I get it, you know, I get it now having a career that you really don't want to have to train someone in. It's a lot of work. But the fact that I was willing to work for free, I think that's usually the deal breaker. You know, people are like, well, I guess I could make time for you if you're going to do it for free. So
no, you have to put forth the drive and the effort as you talked about and everything. And yeah, as you said, not for the weak of heart at all. You gotta put in the work.
There were many times that I looked at my bank account sitting in the red thinking, you know, I really should have been an anesthesiologist. But, you know, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I've met some of the most wonderful people, but it is very challenging all the way through. I mean, there's never a point where you're like on easy street, right? Like in my mind, I always thought you could like get over this hump and, you know, it's just easy sailing from there. And that's not really true. You're always working at it. But I think that's true in any career path that people want to have that type of job. You're always going to have competition. I think that makes you a better person too.
Yeah, absolutely. No, for sure. So also you talked about, it sounds like from very early on, archery. Mm-hmm. Has that from day one just been the focus or what was the drive to get into bow hunting?
You know, I always enjoyed all the hunting, right? But the thing I liked about bow hunting is the fact that I could extend my season. It could be longer. And I also have always liked things that take a little bit more effort, that someone who just decides to pick it up today can't pick it up today and be better than I am that same day. They have to work at it. I was a pole vaulter throughout my whole life for that same reason. I mean, you can have really fast people who come to a track meet that maybe they're football players or something else, and they can do a 100-meter sprint and they can beat you. But there's very few people who could come up to a track meet, grab a pole, and pole vault better than someone who's been doing it for years. So I think there's a part of that I always felt that that's an area I could excel at, that I would work harder than everybody else. That's always been my motto my whole life. And it has proven really helpful, especially in the bow hunting world.
Awesome. What were some of your earliest bow hunting memories that really stick out in your mind?
Getting started, I had to draw 40 pounds before I could start bow hunting. And I remember doing push-ups in my bedroom over and over. Now, I was kind of small, and I wasn't what I would say super strong. So to be able to draw 40 pounds at 12 years old, that was going to be pretty tough for me. So I started doing push-ups and shooting my bow, and I was able to do it and going out and shooting some of my first deer. It was the most amazing experience because I had tried and worked so hard for so long to make that possible that it really was something pretty cool. And, I'm lucky because my mom bow hunted, my dad bow hunted. We were part of a bow hunting family. We always went out for our shotgun slug seasons too. But I was a part of that. We shot targets together. We spent that time outside. And that's really what I try to do now, is involve our kids as well. Never push them, but always make it available that if they want to come join us, archery, right now we've got a big archery 3D range right outside our front door to make it as easy as possible to get out and shoot as much as we can.
That's awesome. So I want to unpack one other thing that you mentioned, and not to dive into, respective states' hunting and game regulations and everything, but you talked about how you in your state you have to be 12 years old to be able to start hunting, and how, in your opinion, it should be younger than that. Why?
Yeah, I just think that at 12, you've lost a lot of people. And if you look at the stats, a lot of times it's not those kids that are having the accidents and being, irresponsible. They are with an adult. The adult is usually not hunting. I'm just a firm believer of getting kids hooked on hunting earlier. And I think as long as they have the correct training, and you really have to use your judgment. Every kid is different. There are certain kids that might need to wait till they're 16 because they're just not mature enough. There are certain kids that can hunt much younger because they have the work ethic, they have the dedication. And of course, it's always got to be a very controlled situation. But I'm a firm believer in, trying to get states to lower the limits, make sure adults are there, keep them safe, but get them hooked on hunting earlier. So that way you're not competing with sports and everything else. A lot of times by the time they're 12, they're involved in so many things. A lot of times they don't have time to hunt.
Yeah. No, I understand that. I think back to my own experience, and so many people do, of, as early as they can think back, they're in the woods, they're hunting with their dads or whoever influenced them in that path and everything. So that makes total sense. Absolutely. So, filming, production, when you got into it and when you started, I know it was a lot different than definitely what it is right now, because right now anybody can even take one of these things out and make it look pretty good at this day and age. But what was the role of a cameraman like when you first got into it?
It was tough. There's no question. The cameras were absolutely huge. The batteries were giant. They didn't last very long. And getting started, I got put through the ringer physically. There's no question. I did some hunts. I did some very, very high elevation hunts with all the big heavy equipment. I remember getting elevation sickness and was throwing up in between elk coming in, but I was the cameraman and I toughed through it, and we just kept going up. And I thought, what a terrible idea. I think I could die from this eventually. But learning to just tough it out, sitting in tree stands, trying to get tree arms to hold, these cameras that weigh so much weight. Everything's got to be perfect. It was very, very challenging. Plus, it was very expensive.
Yeah.
I remember our first camera, I think, was like $100,000.
Oh,
so
wow.
now here I am, 20 years old, out with all this expensive equipment, thinking I'm not worth a tenth of this. And they gave me all this equipment. I sure hope I don't wreck it. And I sure hope I know how to use it correctly. And, I just remember like going through the other producers I worked with, going through all their footage, literally writing down every shot they did on a hunt. So I had kind of a list to go by. And, those first hunts, I'm sure I did not do the greatest job, but I can promise you I gave it everything I had. And I was so proud of the work that I had done at that time. Now, of course, I'm going to completely progress as I go. And I sure hope when I go out filming now, it's way better than what I did then. but I think it makes you tough. I think a lot of that gives you pretty thick skin. It wasn't always easy dealing. Not all the people were super nice to me. Not all the outfitters, not all the hunters. You run into things, but what it does is it teaches you how you should always make sure you act, because you're all on the same team. There's nothing I hate seeing more than if you're out with an outfitter and they kind of try to separate cameraman versus hunter, like blaming it on one or the other. Right now, I mean, my cameraman and I, we've hunted together for so many years. That's not going to ever work. If anyone even tries that, I make it very clear, hey, we're all on the same team here. We will get it done. We've done it many times. So let's just be positive, and maybe it works this time, maybe it doesn't. Not the end of the world. And I think sometimes that's a better attitude to have than to kind of freak out and think, oh gosh, we have to get a show. It's the end of the world. No, it's not. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. It's free range hunting. That's how it goes.
Yeah, exactly. So, and you talked about how you would also film your stuff when you were starting out, so that you had that to, film it, edit it, have that to give them if they needed it, if they had a spot. But then you also talk about these challenges. So what was self-filming like back then?
It's really hard.
I can only imagine.
It was so hard, not only because the gear was so bulky and trying to self-film, but it was so expensive. Like, they wouldn't let me use the gear that I worked with. So I had to save every dime of a paycheck that wasn't very big to try to buy a mediocre camera to self-film to give them back my stuff for free. I mean, the worst business model you could ever imagine. But that's what I did. And, I'd carry the clunky gear. And now if you have a little money, you can get fiber, carbon fiber legs that are lighter. Well, I didn't have the money. So I had heavy old tripod legs. Yeah. I had all these things. And, there were definitely times when animals got to walk because I couldn't get the gear together. In fact, to this day, I still didn't end up getting to film one of the biggest whitetails I've ever seen in the world out on a hunt because my gear was just too clunky. And it's just one of those things that'll always forever live in my memory, but you learn from it. And I think having that background, it makes you appreciate it even more now. We're traveling to Africa next week, and I'm getting my gear together, and I can fit almost everything in a Pelican case now. So it's pretty amazing to see how much more compact it is. And that's really important because, like, my husband and I did a Kodiak brown bear hunt a couple of years ago. We ended up just filming it ourselves. And when you have to pack all that gear in, boy, having lighter gear is a big, big help.
Absolutely. No, for sure. So at what point was your break over? Because, you talked about, how you were grinding away and working at it, and every dime you had went into this thing and trying to follow your dream, basically. At what point did it turn in from, oh, who's this lady filming me, to, oh, that's Melissa, to you're shifting now in front of the camera?
Well, it took a long time. So even in the beginning, I did a couple of shows. I got lucky. I shot a 202-inch whitetail with my bow, filmed it all, had a pack of coyotes chase it to me, ran it on TV. And even after that, yeah, some people maybe knew that I was a cameraman too, but you didn't really have like the break you're thinking of, right? If I would have ever guessed, okay, if I shoot a giant buck, that'll be all I need. That's not true. So it's just years of just keeping after it. I had a few shows, and then I actually went on a hunt with some guys from Winchester, showed them some of my stuff that I had that hadn't even aired yet. And they're like, wow, that's pretty good. And I ended up starting to talk about the idea of maybe making my own show, because now, not only did I have quite a few hunts done that were all mine because I paid for all the camera gear, I used my vacation time. Nobody owned that. So I had those together. I knew how to do literally every single aspect of it. So one of the hardest parts when you get started is hiring a production company, because you need a whole bunch of money. Well, I didn't have the money, but what I did have is the knowledge of every step of the way. So what was really nice is I thought, I know how to do it from start to finish, all the way to delivering it to the network. So I started kind of getting the idea of, well, maybe I could create my own show. So I just decided one day, I think I had 8 episodes already in the can, and thought, you know what, I'm going to go for it. I started making the calls. Winchester was my very first sponsor I ever signed on. And I ended up actually signing my house up for, if I couldn't make the airtime payments, they could take my home. Wow. So that was basically my incentive to be a very good salesman
Yeah.
and try to figure out, like, how am I going to sell this? How am I not going to go in the hole? And it was very challenging. I made some big mistakes in the beginning. I thought I could do better on sales than I did and ate a lot of the inventory myself. But, I learned from it, and it does take a long time to not be going in the red. My mom's an accountant, and she was never impressed with my business model because I literally would just go out and hunt until I ran out of money, and I would keep enough money just to get me home. And then I'd just sit in my house and edit and hope that it all would work out.
Wow.
So not the best method, probably not what I would recommend to my kids to do. But again, just the perseverance ended up paying off. And I'd say after 6 or 7 years is how long it took, where I finally started, okay, the TV show is not just a black hole. But what I always kind of had in the background is the production side. So even though I couldn't make money on the TV show and I'd go in the red, I could do projects for people that are just purely production based, that had nothing to do with me on camera. And that's really how I ended up making it, by doing those things on the side that people had no idea I ever did. I would just hire that out. I don't need to be on camera, do it for people. And it really did save me. I was even a cameraman for years for some private people who would pay me to go film their hunts to show their buddies. And I didn't care. I'd set my stuff aside, and I knew I needed to make some money. So I think a lot of it is on the willingness to just do what it takes to make it.
Yeah, 6 or 7 years, a lot of people would hang it up at that point, or long before that if it wasn't working. What what was the hope that you held on to? Just
I
the
just
dream,
felt
or?
that I felt like I had something maybe a little bit different. I felt like I was very authentic. I loved hunting. I've always said that, if I won the lottery tomorrow, I would still hunt all the time. There's a lot of people who just want to have a TV show. If I won the lottery, the first thing that would probably go is the filming, or at least doing the TV part of it. I would be out there hunting every day with my family. So I think that kind of shines through. And I was adamant that I'm going to make it go. I'm a big believer in giving me challenges and not quitting till I do it. And like you said, most other people would quit. Well, I think the IRS gives you 7 years of going in the hole before you have to hang it up. So I figured, well, the government says I get 7 years. I'm going to for sure give it the full 7 years. And I just kept after it. And part of it was, maybe just to prove that, yeah, this is a go. I can do it, And it was a very, very big challenge in many ways because, again, such a small part is really about the hunting. It's learning the business side of it. It's going through, building your own brand and trying to navigate that. I didn't have a team of people. I had me. If you needed something, I was the person you were going to call for anything you needed. They give you all these slots for, your editor, a producer, a marketing person. Just me on every line.
Yeah, no, it's I'm familiar with the small the small timiness of the brand. That's kind of how we operate over here a little bit, but nothing wrong with that. You're able to build better relationships that way, I feel like. So.
And then too, you can, if you tell someone you're going to do something, I think it's helpful because you're taking out the middleman. So people also learn that if you say you'll do it, you deliver on it and then over deliver. It really adds some credibility to it on the business side and the sponsorship side. And that really does help in the long run.
No, I couldn't agree more. So I have another question for you in the self-filming realm. Then, now, anytime, whatever it might be, footage over actually taking an animal home. What takes the priority in your mind?
It's always been the footage. I've passed on some really good bucks over the years. And that's for me probably the hardest because I grew up with whitetails. I love big whitetails. But I'm a believer that you have to do everything all the way to the end to try to get the footage. Because if you even give yourself just a sliver of, well, this is a big buck, I'm just going to shoot it off camera, who cares? Guess what? It'll just snowball and that will become more important, and it can't be. If this is your career path, you have to think of it as the trophy is just as much getting beautiful footage as it is of getting the animal. Now, every once in a while, like you might have an instance where it's the last day, the last evening, if it works, great. If it doesn't, my tag turns into a pumpkin anyway. That maybe is a different situation, but I'll still do everything possible to try to film that and show the experience, because that's what people want. And because of that, I think I've gotten some really good shows over the years because of that, because you're doing everything possible to capture that footage, and you're not going home without it. So you do your best.
For sure. So what sticks out in your mind as one of your most challenging productions from a filming standpoint that you've had to do over the years?
Probably one of the most challenging was the Kodiak brown bear hunt we did. Only because we walked in so far and we had no power. So I actually put this, I think it was called a Yeti something, that I put at the base of my pack. And I think it weighed 16 pounds. Oh, wow. Well, by the time my pack it was so heavy. It was way more than what I should have had. But when you go in, you have to be able to charge batteries. A big part of Kodiak, Alaska is getting time lapses. Well, guess what? To do a time lapse, you're draining your batteries. So you have to have a way to charge them back up. So I would say that was probably one of the most challenging hunts to film. My husband and I both hunted. My husband ended up shooting his brown bear at 4 yards with his bow and arrow. And it was such an amazing deal because we saw the bear coming following a creek. And in my mind, I'm filming and I said, I don't want to be there with you, because if I'm right behind your shoulder, we're going to have 1 second of footage. You'll see the bear, you'll take the shot, and it's over. So I actually stayed up high and filmed the bear coming the whole way, and then pulled out, got a 2-shot with the bear and my husband and Cole all right in the frame, and we stuck a GoPro behind him. So I still got kind of the best of both worlds with that shot over his shoulder as this bear just comes into the frame, but then you could still see it the whole way. So I think part of it is kind of learning like that. In the very beginning, I may not have known that. I'd have stayed with the hunter and you'd have just this tiny little window of footage, and it's not as exciting as if you can see it all go down. So I think that was probably the most challenging, because you run into bad weather. You're sitting there, you're getting rained on and wind and your batteries. I mean, you have so many things going against you. But when we left Kodiak, we had 2 huge bear, and it turned out to be some of my favorite shows I've ever done. And you don't see everything, because when it's really hard, you're not always filming. You're like, oh, I got to set the camera away. I just need to make it right now. I need to be able to keep walking. So I think you miss some of that, but overall, I think you get the idea.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to ask, as a hunter with a bear that close, you're watching from your vantage point. As a hunter, what's going through your mind?
Yeah, my husband, his goal was to get as close as possible to a brown bear. And our last name is Bearshield, so we were joking that what a perfect name. And as it happened, and all this is going down, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I thought the bear was actually going to step on him. That's how close it looked to me. And then I'm thinking, did they tell me to do a sign if the bear's that close? I didn't even know if they knew it. And I'm like, I hope I didn't do anything wrong here. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to roll and see how this plays out. But it's a little scary to be up watching it all go down, thinking, that is super close. When you're wondering if your husband's going to get stepped on by a bear walking by and he's got a bow, I mean, that takes something. And he said when he drew his bow on him, that the bear was so close that all he could see is just fur inside his peep. He actually had to lift his head to see where he was even at on the bear and then go back down. And he made a great shot, and the bear, went down right away. But it's still, you really need to be able to keep your composure. And I think Cole was pretty happy how it all turned out, because that was the closest he had ever had a hunter to a bear as well. And it worked out perfect.
Wow, that's insane. I've grown up hunting whitetail in Texas, and past several years I've started venturing out west into some other states, other animals, and I used to be super I didn't want to go on a bear hunt. I just didn't want to do it. And here lately I've gotten to meet and interact with a lot of people who have gone on brown bear hunts, other species of bear hunts, and I don't know, I'm getting a little pumped about them. I'm considering it strongly at this point.
You would love it. The only thing about brown bears, it's a lot of sitting and waiting, and then all of a sudden it's action packed. So sometimes you can sit there 10, 12 days glassing. But where we went in Kodiak, we were seeing a lot of bear. It's just we didn't make our move until everything was right. And we really tried to capitalize on that stock. It's not like when you do mule deer hunt, spot and stock, for example, with your bow, you know, it might take 10 stalks before you make it right. With brown bear, our method was totally different. We didn't go in until we believed everything was perfect. We only made 2 stalks on that trip, and we killed our bears on both stalks. So it's, you know, it's a different in how you hunt. It's different locations, but it does make it a little less exciting because you sit and wait so long. But when you finally do it, it's pretty awesome to be that successful.
Yeah. No, I can only imagine. I'm gonna have to try it one day.
You'll love it.
So at the time that you're grinding away and pushing and giving it everything that you got to chase your dream here, what else is happening in the outdoor industry? Is there anybody else that's doing what you're doing, trying to do what you're trying to do? And what's setting you apart?
I think there's a lot of people that we all got started right around the same time. And one of the things, I use Tom Miranda as a really good mentor along the way, because he's someone that I met early on, and he was kind of doing it the same way I was, where he kind of he did all the stuff on his own when he got started. So I kind of always was bouncing ideas off of him, asking him questions, and he was so helpful. And there were some things he told me and I didn't listen, and I should have. And there were some things that I was able to avoid because I kind of had some of that advice ahead of time. But, you know, you had a lot of couples. You had Lee and Tiffany, you had Candy, and, you know, you had Pat and Nicole were getting into it, Levi and Samantha. In fact, all of us got together and we did a Matthews shoot together very early on for the Jewel, I think it was. It was a women's bow. And that's kind of the first thing I ever got asked to do when I was a cameraman. And all of a sudden I was like, you want me to come there? And they're like, yeah, we're doing a women's bow. And so it was myself, Samantha Morgan, Tiffany Lukoski, Nicole Reeve, and Candy Kiski. And so they did this big shoot with us, and we were all just kind of getting started. But I think it was so good to have that happen, because early on I decided no one's my competition. Like I want everyone to be successful, because I really believed that you're your only competition in this industry, because the companies have enough money to sponsor 5, 10, 15 people. So you don't ever have to worry about what this person's doing. Well, I don't want to see them do well. You want to see everyone do well, but you want to kind of find your own path. And I just felt like me being a woman on my own, being a really hardcore hunter, that really set me apart. I always wanted to say, even if I was like a 75-year-old man that no one wanted to look at, they would still watch it because the hunting would be that interesting. So that was kind of always the route I took. And there really wasn't any other women all on their own doing what I was doing. So I felt like it was a good thing, you know, for young girls, for families, for new people getting into it, because sometimes people are a little scared to ask questions of guys. But I feel like at shows and when you're doing these things, they're not that afraid to ask women. I don't know if I just seem more open, but they're always coming up asking questions. And again, I think the part of being a people person has really helped, because I believed early on that I was going to go to all the trade shows I could possibly go to. Because let's say you meet 2,000 people at every show. Well, if you do that for 12, 15 years straight, eventually someone might know who you are. Yeah. And might say, hey, I've met her. She's a really nice, authentic person. And that's kind of the route I took on the marketing side of it, is just trying to meet as many people as possible and just go from there. And it's worked. It takes a long time, but I think that has made a difference.
That's awesome. Yeah. Thinking back to even when I was, you know, growing up and everything, and all the names that you just listed and yourself included, you know, those are the first female hunters that you really saw in, you know, producing content, producing shows and everything in the hunting outdoor industry. And, as I mentioned at the very beginning, briefly, you know, it's been inspiring, you know, trickling down, especially now as we've moved into a more of an online media world where anybody can, you know, put something out there to some extent, you know. Definitely been influential in that space, I believe. And I do want to ask you along those lines too, you know, as we're now in this very, you know, social media, if you will, based world, how have things changed for you, or have they, as far as where your focus is, or how you try to reach and influence others?
Yeah, I think it has changed a lot. My goal has always been to try to reach new hunters, to reach families, and get them realizing how powerful hunting can be as a family unit. So I've always thought that that was something really important. And in the beginning, it was all television. And now I still do the TV show, but social media has a huge part in it. I see so many kids at shows who say, I watch you on My Outdoor TV or on YouTube. Some of them don't even have cable. They don't watch television, or they only see your stuff on social media. So I believe in just really diversifying and trying to be in all those places. I'm out there doing the stuff. The number one problem that I think a lot of the people who just do social media have is they have to get content. Well, it's hard to get content if you're just doing social media. For me, I have a television show. I am so full of content usually. Honestly, a lot of times I don't have time to post it all. Yeah. I'm not someone who's on my phone 24/7. So sometimes I'll be like, oh, shoot, I missed posting 3 of our turkeys. Oh, well, no big deal. But there'll still be TV shows. They'll still come out later. So I think it's learning where your audience is. And I think the best way to find that is by going to these trade shows, meeting people in person, hearing where they watch your shows and seeing where you're making a difference. I get people on social media who will write in, about questions for their daughter or their spouse, or getting them set up for archery. And I try to be as available as possible, whether it's in person, on social media, answering people in the comments, or even through direct messages, whatever it takes, trying to get back to people as much as possible. And sometimes that can be a big task, but you try to do your very best. And every once in a while things get missed, but you try to do a really good job.
That's awesome that you do it that way. That's the best way to do it. I completely agree with you. And I've received some advice myself, recently, that not just for networking purposes, but as you just said, just being able to meet people, talk to people. The trade shows are huge, and right now, so many people just, I feel like, send, and I'm guilty of it, but send a message, on social media, whether they're looking for, a brand partnership or, whatever it might be. Everything is just so digital, and that in-person, face-to-face interaction is being undervalued, I feel like, a lot. And yeah, any trade show that you have the opportunity to go, I need to go to more myself, but I think the more you can do, the better, especially in this industry.
I think it's super important. And I do seminars at them, and I'm always blown away at the number of people that still go to a seminar.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but you go there, you get to talk, see, interact with people. And it's so different to have a face-to-face conversation. And especially if you're a people person and you're a nice person, it can go so far. Like I said, if you meet 2,000 people and they're all super impressed with how nice you were, how much time you took and answered questions and took pictures with their kids, they tell 10 people each. Like I said, after 14, 15 years, a lot of people who have had either direct contact with you or a close friend has said, I've met her, they're a good person, whatever it may be. I just think that is an area that people undervalue. And the idea of seminars, I do an hour-long seminar on all sorts of different topics, and I can't tell you how much I've learned from people who have sat in my seminar, who come say, that's a great idea, but here's what I do. Have you ever tried that? And I've gone out and tried the things that they've told me in seminars. So I feel like I'm always learning. You're always picking things up, and it's a lot of benefits to me as a hunter as well.
Absolutely. No, it brings, I feel like it grounds you a little bit, and helps you stay in touch with just the bare bones, the authenticity of the hunting community as a whole. That's 100%. The best way I can describe it, at least. But
yep, absolutely.
You've been in this industry for a while, and there's undoubtedly been critics, haters, for lack of a better term. How do you deal with that?
I have had it all. In the beginning, I ran into so much from the anti-hunting community, and it was crazy because I just never expected it. I didn't know that would happen. I had a big target on my back. I got them by the thousands. I had people at my front door, people picketing. It was awful. And so pretty quickly you learn, okay, no big deal. Moving on from them. They wake up, they're very angry people. We live two totally different lives. That's fine. The thing I always found that was more difficult was the infighting within the hunting community. There's nothing that I hate seeing more than fighting among our own community, saying, well, I don't like you. You hunt private land. I hunt public land. You hunt traditional bow. I hunt crossbow, whatever it might be. I think that's one of the most detrimental things. And not only because it divides us, but I see it for young kids. People are afraid to post on social media because they don't want other hunters ripping on them about the size or the age of the deer or what they're using. I see it all the time where kids will say, hey, I shot this. I didn't put it on social media because I don't want to get blasted over it because maybe it's not the biggest buck. And I said, you should be proud of everything you get. So to me, that's been the hardest to deal with because I think you can really scare people off. And as a hunting community, I am someone who wants more people in. Now, there's a couple of people in the industry who are totally against that. And, that's fine. Maybe you'll have more hunting space right now, but it won't take long before we have no hunters if we're not actively trying to get more people involved. It's a lifestyle. If we don't teach our children this lifestyle, it's literally a generation away and they'll forget all about it. I mean, I had a 3rd grade class, I think it was, write to me about how awful I am as a hunter and I should just go get chicken nuggets, right? And just eat normal food. And it's like, oh my goodness, we're so far away from kids remembering where their food comes from that scares me. So, the haters, they'll always be there. I get it all the time. I don't mind any of it. I literally will go, if I think that they're a hunter, all right, I defend myself all the time. And I say, you know what? Let's not do this, right? I don't care. You're not going to offend me. I have the thickest skin you're ever going to find. But you might be scaring off some young girl who wants to get started, who literally is afraid to post because of bullies like you. And I'll usually put them in their spot. And 9 times out of 10, they'll kind of apologize and say, gee, I didn't think about it that way. And there'll be a few that just go on a big rant. That's fine. I just block and delete them and move on.
Yeah.
I don't give it a lot of thought anymore. I'm not going to put up with that negativity. I'm not a negative person. I don't want to be around.
No, that's an advantage, I guess, of the online social media world is you can't hit that button and not have to worry about somebody anymore.
And very seldom do people do it in person. People are not very likely to come up and just give you this huge rant in person. I've had a couple, and that's fine. I'll listen to them. Okay, thanks. I respect your opinion. No thanks, and they're just kind of blown away. I was at a trade show recently, I think it was this year, and a woman came up to me and said, I will not watch your shows. I do not like that you wear makeup. And I said, great, that's cool. There's lots of shows you can pick from. And she just kind of stood there and I said, it doesn't bother me one bit. I want to show girls you can get ready in the morning if you want. You don't have to if you don't want to. This is my job. If a TV interviewer goes online, they usually have makeup on. I choose to put makeup on before I hunt. I have never had it cost me a hunt. Yeah. I feel if I can do it with that on, great. And if you decide you don't want to, that's fine too. And she just kind of stood there like in awe. And I thought, oh, okay.
Like she expected you to apologize or something.
Yeah, I'm not going to apologize. I'm not going to change. I mean, if you really think you're going to get me to change my ways because of your opinion, I'll listen to it. And, maybe you have a valid point on something, but usually, no, thank you. That's not the way I'm going to do it, but you do it however you like. Yeah. And if you're respectful, most of the time people just go on their way.
Yeah. No, I agree. I know you gave an example of somebody interacting with you at a trade show, but if you think in general of how many folks will be a keyboard warrior and write something up and hit send versus how many folks that are just straight up anti-hunting show up at a hunting trade show to just start walking the floor and bash people. Nobody does that. So
I've had 2 people in 15 years ever.
Wow.
So I can't tell you how many hundreds of thousands I've had online. So that shows you the balance right there.
Exactly. So, and on that same kind of lane, what about the folks that look at somebody who has a platform like you do in the hunting and outdoor world and just their ignorance leads them to say, oh, she gets paid to kill big deer?
Oh, I see it all the time, and that's fine. But you could have done it too. A lot of it, you'll find, usually stems from jealousy. And if I tell them how I got to where I am, nobody handed me anything. Whatever your life choices were when you were in your 20s, you could have gone down the exact same career path I did. There was nothing different between us. I didn't have a dad, a mom who was paying for anything, who got my start, who gave me any connections. I did it all from scratch. So are there some benefits now? Sure, I'm sure there are. But I've worked for each and every one of them. And for every benefit I have, there's also double the people with me. I've got myself and a cameraman. I'm trying to get footage. I'm trying to do a lot of different things. I used to go and I would hunt all day and I would edit till 2 a.m, get back up at 4 and hunt again because I didn't have the money to hire an editor. So yeah, I'm getting to hunt some great places, but I'm also running on 2 hours of sleep for the last 6 months. That doesn't cut it very well. And I was pretty sure I was narcoleptic, but really it was just I never got enough sleep. So yeah, you run into it and that's fine. But I usually just try to remind people of how I got to where I am, and anybody can do it, and they'll either take it or leave it or move on. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So in this online world that we are now in, with so many things at everybody's fingertips now, what is your advice for somebody who wants to, whatever it might be, whether it's a show, a social media platform, a podcast, whatever they want to do? What's your advice for somebody, women, for example, too, that are wanting to pave their way in the hunting and outdoor world?
I think the number one thing is to be authentic, whatever that is. If you're not a hardcore person, don't try to pretend that you are, because eventually, even if it works, pretty soon it's going to shine through that that's not really what you enjoy doing. So really kind of pick your lane early on things you actually like, because they'll spot it a mile away. If you're trying to pretend to be something you're not, it's so obvious. So I think that's important. And also to really diversify. Just because you love having a podcast, try to go right, do some YouTube videos, do different things. And that's for anyway. If you want to just have a TV show, well, become a writer too. And maybe do every podcast that asks, or, whatever it might be, try to be as out there as much as possible. If it doesn't cost anything, it's only your time, do it, because it might just help you. And if it doesn't, well, eventually it will. You do 100 of them, eventually it makes a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. How hands-on are you with your productions, with the editing and all that kind of stuff these days?
I'm full hands-on still.
I love it.
And that's because now I have had to learn that I can't do everything. I also have a family. We have 5 kids. I don't want to work 110 hours a week anymore, and sleep 2 hours a night. It's just not my thing anymore. So now what I do is I try to kind of farm out some of the things that others can do to help. So for example, I have Hidden Thicket Productions out of Ohio. I send Dave my shows and he edits them and then he sends them back. And so he has basically the meat of the show and I finish the show. So I might make changes. I still put the whole show together. I do all my own sponsorships. I do all my own contracts. I do all my own bookings for shows that I attend or that I'm going to speak at. I do all my own travel arrangements. I'm very hands-on with things. But part of that is because, well, if there's a mistake, that's my fault. But 2, I know my schedule. I know what I want to do and what's too much. So I feel like I'm kind of the best judge on that. And 3, I don't want to pay someone to do what I can do. Yeah. That's the biggest thing, you can have people doing all sorts of things and there might not be any money left over for you at the end of the day. So the more you do, the more money you can save on that front. And we like to buy land and do things with our family. So that's usually our goal.
That's awesome. You have had a lot of amazing hunting opportunities, but what is something that you haven't gotten to do yet that you want to do? What's Melissa Bachman's bucket list?
Well, let's see. I've done brown bear hunts, but I really want to go back up and call a brown bear in with my bow. I've called in black bears with a predator call, and I've had a black bear come flying in at me. And basically I just pretend I'm the bait because bears can't see very well. and I'm the perfect size, like a deer, they think, a small deer or something. So you blow that predator call and move around, and you basically become the bait, and they come in after you. Well, I want to be able to do that to a big old brown bear and get out there with a hand call, have them see me coming in, get to full draw. And like my black bear, I've had to shoot 3 of them right in the throat because they don't back down. When you call in a big boar, they're coming in for lunch. They're not going to turn sideways to give you that broadside shot. So we have to make sure that it's nice and close because you've got a very small margin of error on the throat shot. But that's my goal, is to do that on a brown bear. And I'm pretty confident someday I'll be able to make that happen. But everything has to be right, because you don't just call at a bear just because you want to do that. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. So everything's got to kind of line up. But I figure if I keep at it long enough, eventually it'll happen.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. What does your setup look like now with we talked earlier about how different, gear is compared to when you first started down this journey. But you and your cameraman going on a whitetail hunt, let's say, what's your pack and his setup and everything? What's that look like?
So we have pretty much all the same gear, so everything's interchangeable. The one thing in the hunting world is you wreck things a lot. We are very, very, very hard on things. So we basically have a backup of everything. So that way I bring all my gear, he brings all his gear. If something goes down, we've got another one. So I've switched to all Sony cameras and Sony lenses. In the beginning, we both had Canon glass. And I found that with some of the new Sony DSLRs, that it works a lot better to have Sony glass with a Sony camera. So I switched over. So usually we'll bring a 1-400 with the extender on it. If we're doing a rifle hunt, always bringing a tripod. I use the Gitzo legs that are a carbon fiber leg with a Sockler head. It's a smaller head, but it's pretty sturdy. Usually we'll remove the handle on it. And then I'll use a Sony FX9 as our main camera. And that's still a bigger body camera. It's got an arm that comes down so you can hold it, still like a regular camera. But we'll use 2 DSLRs as well as just kind of extra point of view cameras. I've got 3 GoPros that I'm always running. If I'm bow hunting, I have one that's on a bracket. It's called a Sportsman's bracket that goes right on your bow that looks back at me. So that way, my goal is to not have to do any fake cutaways. I want everything to be as realistic as possible. So if we're in a tree stand, I'll have my GoPro looking back at me. My cameraman will be over my shoulder on a tree arm filming with the big camera. We'll have a DSLR on another arm kind of looking back, and then he'll keep a DSLR. We actually use, it's a tree step that is a drink holder, and a lens fits in it perfectly. So you can basically set a DSLR upside down in it. So that way he can film, and then he can just grab that quick for the reaction. So it really works well. And then we keep a variety of shorter lenses. Usually we've got a 70-300, and then a little shorter, I think something to 105 is on the other camera. And then I bought a little real wide lens, but I don't like it as much. It's kind of it's like a pancake lens, but it's almost too wide. My idea is when we're in a blind, I like to have that wide shot. And so I got it on a DSLR, but honestly, a lot of times the GoPro is easier to do with that. So you don't have 2 sets of tripods in the blind if there's already 2 of you in there.
I gotcha. That was going to be my next question, actually, as far as the reactions and the authenticity of that, because we have some of our own shows and everything over here too. We've branched out beyond just a podcast, like you mentioned earlier and everything. But so whenever I watch hunting shows, I'm always watching it through the eyes of, a producer, as far as, okay, how are they filming? What do their shots look like? And I'm piecing it together and breaking it down that way. But I always look at the reactions in the shot, like, is that genuine, or did they go back and recreate that?
Right.
And so that was my question, and you already answered it. But as far as the authenticity of that, and how many times, if you even ever do, go back and try to recreate any part of it.
I won't, because I'm not a paid actor.
Yeah.
So I believe that we need to just get it. And if he's fumbling around, and let's say he's stopping the big camera and getting that ready, you're going to always have the GoPro as to what's happening between it. So I'll just cut to the real stuff. Now, every once in a while, you might see a shot in an open that's like looking down at your eyes or something. Of course, that probably wasn't, as a deer is coming in, him standing in front of me, right? You have to have a few different shots along the way. But as a rule, everything I try to put in the show is as real and as it's happening. And I think it's so true too, because then when things don't go right, it's who cares? You show it how it happens. And I think people can relate to that better.
I 100% agree with that. So as far as the self-filming side of everything goes, what are some tips and tricks that you have what is some advice that you have as far as tips and tricks and stuff that folks can do if they don't have the luxury of having a cameraman with them?
I think buying those cheaper cameras is huge. GoPros are not that expensive now, and you can literally save yourself by having, maybe even a GoPro over your shoulder and one looking back at you to get as realistic of shots as you can. And when I'm whitetail hunting, if it's during the rut, I'm hunting over a decoy. And one, that's because I love hunting over a decoy, but it also makes it easier when you're self-filming because you know about where that deer is going to be. So you can kind of set up for that. And I think that's something that can be really helpful. And, planning it out, it's like a mental preparation, knowing where your camera is, where the deer are probably going to go, when are you going to draw, can you look at your viewfinder and then make your shot and then get back on the camera. I think that's something to really think through and practice. If you've got does, young bucks coming through, see if you can make it happen. I've even been at full draw and kind of nudged a camera to shift it so it's a little bit more centered or whatever it might be. And again, show it. People love seeing the reality of it and knowing you're doing all those things. So
awesome. I know I said that was the last question, but I have one more for you. Sorry.
Okay.
You do so much production wise in the field while you're hunting. Do you ever just want to hunt and put down the camera and forget all about it?
No, not really. And the reason why is because I've learned to enjoy the filming just as much. That's why when I joke that if I won the lottery, I'd quit filming, that's probably not true because I actually love the filming part. I probably would quit showing it to anybody and just have it for my own family and kids. The one thing I would quit doing, which does get old sometimes, is talking about what I'm going to do. And sometimes I get what I'd call lazy, and I don't want to talk about what I'm going to do. I'm in a great spot. I want to just be quiet and hunt.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll run into shows where I've got amazing footage and we get a great animal, but I didn't do hardly anything leading up to it because I was so focused on the hunting part. We're still there filming, but sometimes I'm not as good about, doing all those things as much as I should, but I still love having the camera in the field. Coyote hunting is a perfect example. We've gotten to the point we don't do anything other than just killing coyotes and showing the setup. And it comes to the show and I'm like, oh gosh, what are we going to do now? We have 84 kills and almost nothing else. So it is what it is. But overall, I really do enjoy it. And it's just as much fun trying to get good footage as it is getting big animals.
That's a great answer. Awesome. Well, Melissa, I really appreciate, like I said at the beginning, you accepting our invitation to come on the show and joining me for an episode. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. Real quick, if we have any, for most it would probably go without saying, but if we have any new hunters that are tuning into the show that don't know anything about you, how do they find you? How do they find your show?
You can go to melissabachman.com and basically find everything online, or my show is Winchester Deadly Passion. It runs on Sportsman's Channel year-round, Sunday mornings at 11:30 Eastern Time, or a whole bunch of other times during the week. I don't know all the air times, but you can find it on Sportsman's Channel, Winchester Deadly Passion, or melissabachman.com.
Awesome. Well, folks, go check out Melissa Bachman. Follow her journey if you're not already. I appreciate you guys tuning in to another Fall Obsession podcast. Thank you again, Melissa. Really appreciate it. And with that, guys, we're signing off, and I'll be back again with y'all next week for another podcast. Thank y'all.